Millionaire discovers Maid secretly eating leftovers. The touching truth will leave you inspired. Jake Henderson, a titan of technology, stood in his palatial Los Angeles mansion. Glistening marble floors sparkled under lavish chandeliers, but the light felt stark and blinding against the weight of his unease. Outside, palm trees swayed in the gentle sun, a false mirror of serenity reflecting the crumbling state of his own soul. Despite the wealth crammed into every corner of his life, an aching hollowness gnawed at him, a constant reminder that he was alone. His younger brother, Mark, was struggling in a public school, inspiring hope amidst daily battles. Jake, with each dollar earned, had further distanced himself from the bond they once shared. Late one night, prowling the kitchen filled with remnants of extravagant dinners, Jake's attention locked onto Rosa, his devoted maid. He had noticed her before, but now he saw her sneaking out with a box of unfinished food. Rage ignited in him, a primitive instinct to protect his territory. "What are you doing?" he barked, his voice echoing harshly in the silence. She straightened, eyes wide as if he had struck her. In that moment, she became more than just a maid. She was a mirror reflecting his own reckless excess. "Feeding my children," she finally replied, defiance flickering in her gaze. She unfolded layers of her life, revealing how she had been delivering plates to her neighbors' struggling families like her own. Anguish twisted in Jake's gut. Through her fierce spirit, he saw pieces of himself he feared. He had lost values of love, connection, support, all smothered beneath his empire. The confrontation left him reeling, caught between anger and admiration. He thought of Mark again, the brother he had slackened ties with for business deals and luxurious living. Regret wrapped around his heart, thick and suffocating. Compelled by the pain of realization, Jake reached for his phone, but fear gripped him. What could a text ever convey? Each message sent was another reminder of years lost, the widening chasm between them. Marky began typing, but hesitated. Would he even care? Mark had built a life centered on integrity, while Jake's world was melting under the weight of fame and money. A race of thoughts tightened his throat. Would he even be welcome? He stared into the darkness, ready for rejection, ready for the bitter taste of more solitude. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The days passed, and Jake found himself unraveling in unexpected ways. A friendship blossomed with Rosa, her selfless acts nudging him toward reflections he had long avoided. Still, beneath the surface, anguish simmered. As he threw himself into community development, building projects under the sun, every plan served as a reminder of the brotherly bond lost in the abyss of personal gain. The gap felt insurmountable. Just as Jake began to perceive the elusive path of acceptance, tension heightened. The shadow of Jake's luxurious life crept further into his mind, whispering doubts about leaving it all behind. Standing in emotional precipice, his phone buzzed, illuminating a message from Mark. Would it be his chance at redemption, or the final nail in the coffin of their relationship? Jake stared at the screen, his pulse racing. The message from Mark was terse. "Can we talk?" A wave of emotions crashed over him: nostalgia, anxiety, hope. This was it, the moment he had both dreaded and longed for. He recalled their last encounter, a rushed goodbye, an exchange heavy with unsaid words, an abrupt end cloaked in tension that echoed like a ghost in his mind. The gulf between them seemed insurmountable, a chasm filled with unspoken grievances and regrets. Yet here was this flicker of possibility. He took a deep breath, a strategy forming in his mind. This was not a conversation to be had over text or in the confines of his lavish home. This demanded sincerity and, above all, vulnerability. He knew he needed to meet Mark face to face, to give the conversation the weight it deserved. Jake's heart raced, and he typed back yes. When? While waiting for a response, he couldn't shake the confrontation with Rosa from his mind. Her fiery spirit had ignited a sense of purpose within him that he hadn't felt in years. He could see the distance she had traveled, overcoming challenges with resolve. In her, he recognized the integrity he had lost touch with. The thought of her family-hungry children relying on the scraps he discarded cut through the plush fabric of his material world. This wasn't just about leftover food. This was about human connection, dignity, and shared humanity. Within that turmoil lay clarity. He had been living in excess while others struggled. The juxtaposition of his wealth against the everyday battles of those around him was stark, yet pushed him towards something greater. Jake had become so consumed by his empire that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. Inspired by Rosa, he decided to channel his wealth not just into flashy projects, but into initiatives that could genuinely uplift lives. This decision felt refreshing, a step toward a new version of himself. Mark replied, "How about tomorrow noon?" With his heart pounding, Jake took a moment to gather himself. Excitement mixed with fear, an intoxicating cocktail of emotions. He had spent so long building walls, but as he considered the possibility of reconciling with his brother, he felt a longing to break them down. Each conversation had the potential for growth, a chance to immerse himself in the possibilities of change. The next day arrived with burdensome anticipation hanging in the air. Jake chose a small cafe, one that sat at the edge of the neighborhood he had once known. The weight of the building's history pressed upon him, a stark contrast to the opulence of his life. Suddenly, every luxurious moment felt insignificant alongside what was to transpire. He took a seat and fidgeted with his coffee cup. Memories of their childhood flooded back, illuminating the reasons for their bond. Mark had been his anchor, a figure of strength through their family's struggles, a stark reminder of who Jake once was. At that moment of reflection, he spotted Mark entering. His brother's demeanor was guarded, eyes scanning the room, searching for reassurance. The distance between them, both physical and emotional, seemed dizzyingly vast. Jake's heart pounded louder as he raised a hand in greeting, hoping desperately for the warmth they had once shared. "Hey," Mark said, hesitating for a beat before joining him. The air crackled with tension, thick with the unsaid. Jake was acutely aware that this moment was a crossroad, his chance for redemption, but it demanded authenticity. "What's on your mind?" Mark's tone was cautious, laced with skepticism. Jake opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. Would he finally confront the truths he had buried deep? Would he lay bare the fears of his failures, the loneliness that wealth had wrought? This moment defined them both, and the stakes had never been higher. "Can we start over?" He finally asked, but would Mark be willing to share in that journey, or would the chasm remain unbridgeable? As silence enveloped them, Jake realized this might be the deciding moment of change. The answer he sought lay within the cracks ready to be mended. Would they grasp the chance handed to them, or let it slip away, folding back into the shadows of their shared past? The pause hung in the air, dense and suffocating. Mark's eyes narrowed, processing what Jake had just put forth. The weight of their shared history had always loomed large, but now it felt like a physical presence. Jake could sense the conflict swirling within Mark, and his own heart raced as he braced for the reaction. After what felt like an eternity, Mark leaned back slightly. "Start over? Really?" His voice held a mixture of disbelief and skepticism that pierced Jake to the core. This was not just a simple request. It was a plea for reconciliation, a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. "Yes," Jake said, finding a steadiness he wasn't sure he possessed. "I'm tired of pretending everything is fine. We both know it's not. I've been so caught up in my own world, and I forgot what's important." Mark's expression wavered for a moment, and Jake's hopeful heart dared to quicken. Could this be the moment they both needed? Yet, as the stillness stretched onward, Jake felt his bravado beginning to falter. "You think saying a few words in a cafe can fix the wreckage?" Mark's guarded tone cut deep, a reminder of all the times Jake had taken their relationship for granted. They both wore scars, worn from years of silence. Yet vigor surged within Jake. He was ready to shed the weight of old narratives. It's not about fixing anything in one conversation. I want to truly understand what happened between us. I want to make amends, Mark. I want to mean something again, not just to you, but to myself. I need to reconnect. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his eyes betraying the tumult beneath his calm facade. This was a man negotiating between forgiveness and the memories that haunted him. Each response could tip the balance either way, but Jake realized it was his turn to come clean. Do you remember Grandma's kitchen? Jake pressed, drawing on laughter from their past, the smell of baking cookies, the sound of laughter echoing through the cramped rooms. Those moments felt so real, pure. Somewhere along the line, I lost that. I lost us. The flash of recognition in Mark's face sharpened the atmosphere, illuminating shadows of forgotten warmth. I remember, he said softly, his voice a touch less defensive. But those days are long gone. I know, Jake replied, his heart aching. But what if they don't have to be? What if we can create new memories? I want to help you, be there for you like I used to, even if it means starting from the ground up. Mark stared at him, weighing his words, and Jake could see the flicker of hope behind his brother's cautious facade. Yet the doubts remained. Do you mean that? Or is this just a ploy to feel better about yourself? The skepticism lay bare, a demand for accountability that tangled in the air. Taking a deep breath, Jake felt a thrill of determination course through him. This was more than a moment of self-justification. This was an ownership of his failures and an openness to transformation. It's not about feeling good, Mark. It's about recognizing the hurt I caused and wanting to take that burden seriously. I can't change what has happened, but I can work towards healing us. Silence reigned again, drawing out like a long exhale. Mark's eyes softened for the first time, revealing vulnerability that echoed Jake's own. They both stood on the edge of a precipice. A choice lay before them. Cling to the past or boldly leap toward the future. Okay, Mark said slowly, his voice nearly a whisper. But it won't be easy. Trust doesn't come back overnight. Jake nodded, a subtle smile breaking through layers of tension. I'm not asking for easy, just a chance. Together, we can rewrite our story. As they exchanged glances, Jake's thoughts turned to Rosa and how her bravery had inspired him to seek authenticity. This moment wasn't just about family. It was a profound personal awakening, one that reframed his values and projected future chapters where dignity and connection ruled over greed. But before Jake could voice a thought about a possible path forward, an unfamiliar ringing interrupted them, shattering the fragile atmosphere. His phone vibrated on the table. As he glanced down, an urgent message flashed across the screen, twisting a grin into a frown. Jake! Mark's voice trembled with curiosity. Curiosity rapidly morphed into a deeper concern as Jake felt a chill creep down his spine. It's a business deal gone wrong. I need to take this. As he stood to excuse himself, he paused, realizing this was more than just another obligation. This was a pivotal moment to define his future and possibly Clara's too. The storm of professional chaos was calling, but so too was the irrevocable chance to shape the bond he held with his brother. What would he choose to prioritize when the tide turned? With a last glance at Mark, Jake stepped outside, heart pounding, the weight of his decisions enveloping him once more. The future, daunting yet luminous with potential, beckoned him. Would he be the man who solved his personal struggles only to be swept up again, or could he draw upon newfound resolve to navigate both his family's healing and complicated professional obligations? Uncertainty loomed ahead, each step a potential pivot point. Would he find the balance that truly mattered, or would ambition eclipse connection once again? The answer remained tantalizingly out of reach, poised to unveil itself. Jake stepped outside, the late afternoon sun scorching his skin as it flooded the sidewalk with a golden hue. The atmosphere felt thick with impending rain, mirroring the tempest brewing inside him. The weight of Mark's expression lingered in his mind, intertwining with the urgency of the message now flashing on his phone. He needed to orient himself fast. The entanglement of personal growth and professional obligation waged war within him. As he clicked open the message, words darted across the screen like errant thoughts, details about the deal that had just gone south. A critical partner had withdrawn at the last minute, and a chain reaction was imminent. It wasn't just about the money. It was about reputation, the credibility he had worked hard to build. Yet, within this chaos lay an opportunity, a chance to test the resolve he had just discovered with Mark. Would he rise to the occasion or let the pressure drive him back into his old patterns? He remembered Clara's unwavering support, how she always challenged him to confront his fears head-on. In this moment, her voice echoed like a mantra, urging him to take accountability, to prioritize not just success, but integrity. Taking a slow breath, Jake remembered his grandmother's wisdom, the way she emphasized that true strength lay in deciding who you were going to be when the going got tough. He could handle this, he thought, adapting his approach instead of yielding to the flood of emotions threatening to drown him. But how could he act without sacrificing the progress he just made with Mark? His phone buzzed again, another urgent message, a reminder of the meeting he had set up with his investors that was heading straight into a financial storm, now that their trust had been shaken. Would they perceive his gravitas or view him as a failure? The stakes were high, and he could already imagine Clara's disappointed look if he fumbled this. He felt the old tendencies rising, the urge to run, to escape back into the safety of his previous self. But the conversation with Mark had lit something unquenchable in him. He had just offered to rebuild a vital part of his life. Could he extend the same commitment to his professional world? Could he reconcile these two worlds without losing himself again? With resolve temporarily seasoned by clarity, Jake decided not to hide behind excuses. He would take control of the situation, confront it with the same intensity he had mustered in the cafe, connecting with both the professionalism he had strived for and the newfound emotional foundation he was redeveloping with Mark. Walking back inside, he paced before his brother, the sounds of the cafe fading into a distant memory. "I have to handle this," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'll call them, composed and upfront. But, Mark, I need you to be my anchor through this." It wasn't just about fixing the business issue at hand. It was about being transparent, about showing Mark that they could both rise from the ashes together. Mark was listening now, the tension of prior moments giving way to something new, perhaps understanding. This could lead to more complications. "Jake," he cautioned, his tone more open, less defensive. "I know," Jake replied, locking eyes with him, sharing a moment of silent agreement that at least this much had become possible between them. As he reached for his phone, a sense of foreboding washed over him, a realization that this single call might cascade through both his personal life and business, altering his paths irrevocably, but also igniting within him a courage built from vulnerability. He dialed, the echoes of the ringing serving as a countdown, bracing himself for whatever was next. Was he on the brink of failure or a breaking point that would redefine his values? The tension tugged at his insides, unpredictably swirling into something electric. But what would emerge from this clash? As he steadied himself for the impending confrontation, clarity and uncertainty danced together, leaving him questioning whether this moment would either fortify his resolve or unravel everything he hoped to rebuild. Summoning every thread of determination, he prepared to face not just a business crisis, but the genuinely pivotal test of who he had resolved to be, not just as a brother or a partner, but as a man pursuing genuine redemption. Would he find the courage to face not just his business challenges, but the shadows from his past as well? The stakes had never been higher, and both his future and the chance to heal his brother lay in the balance. The moment the call connected, Jake's heartbeat echoed in his ears, drowning out the sound of the bustling cafe behind him. Each ring felt like a countdown to destiny. He had envisioned this moment countless times, rehearsing different approaches in his mind. Yet, now, the gravity of his choices loomed larger than ever. "Hello, this is Jamie," the voice on the other line greeted. Formal and distant, It gave Jake little to latch onto. "Hi, Jamie, it's Jake." He paused, struggling against the weight of his delivery. "I wanted to discuss the recent developments regarding the partnership. I understand that you've expressed concerns following our last meeting." As he spoke, he noticed Mark's anxious expression in the background, eyes fixed on Jake, silently willing him to navigate this treacherous conversation. Taking his cue, Jake straightened his shoulders, allowing his newfound resolve to seep into every syllable. "Let me be transparent," he continued, allowing the words to travel slowly and firmly. "I take full responsibility for what happened. I want to deny the impact this may have on your trust in us. However, I believe in the objectives we set, and I'm committed to regaining your confidence." He listened intently, deducing the fluctuations in Jamie's tone, searching for signs of engagement or withdrawal. The world outside the cafe blurred into the background. The voices faded as he focused intently on this singular moment of potential redemption. "I appreciate your honesty, Jake," Jamie responded cautiously. "But our partners may not be so forgiving. This situation has put everyone on edge, and it's critical we see some proactive measures from your side." The thread of doubt, so easily nameless, began to weave its way back into Jake's consciousness. His instincts screamed at him to abandon this path, to retreat into self-doubt. He could feel the familiar hands of fear tugging at him. But something inside him fought back, emboldened by the support of Mark and Clara. "I understand that," Jake replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "Our immediate plans include corrective actions to prevent further disruptions. I'll ensure that we have a strategy in place ready for our follow-up meeting. I can guarantee you that the integrity of our partnership is my top priority." Silence hung heavily for a moment, but then Jamie said, "You'll need more than that, Jake. Concrete steps, deadlines will be waiting to see if you can actually turn this around, but know that trust once broken can take a long time to rebuild." Jake felt a tightness in his chest. With those words, Jamie had drawn a line. This was not just about saving the deal. It was about embedding integrity into his very being, the essence of who he intended to be moving forward. "Understood," Jake replied. "I will reach out with a specific plan by the end of the week." His resolve was strengthening, but in the back of his mind lay the nagging reality of where he had come from. The man who had retreated into avoidance. After wrapping up the call, he turned to Mark, who raised an eyebrow, questioning Jake's reaction. "You held your ground," Mark noted, evident respect dancing around the edges of uncertainty. "But did I really?" Jake asked genuinely. "Can I really pull this off?" Mark shifted closer, his voice low but reassuring. "You did something different this time, Jake. You didn't T-run, you confronted. That's growth." The tension between relief and dread twisted within Jake. Yes, he had taken a step, but the journey ahead looked fraught with peril. How would he build on this moment? His phone buzzed violently, breaking the momentary stillness. A message flashed up, a reminder for their upcoming meeting with the investors. It was time to present himself as someone worthy of receiving support. But a question lingered: could he navigate this new landscape without losing himself? As he stepped further into this new reality, Jake recognized that the personal journey intertwined with professional survival was more challenging than he had anticipated. Each choice he made would carve out a path, but how? Could he ensure it led him to a stronger, more authentic self? In the distance, the skies grew darker, a storm brewing on the horizon, mirroring the chaos within him. But with storms come the chance of clarity. A defining moment was escalating, and Jake was left contemplating the paradox. Was he strong enough to embrace vulnerability again, to confront the past that still echoed in his decisions? As he prepared for the meeting, he realized the heart of his evolution would demand more than he had ever expected. Would he be able to rise not just for himself, but for those counting on him? Jake sat at his desk late into the evening, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating scattered papers and charts. The quiet hum of the world outside seemed miles away as he pored over the notes from his call with Jamie. Each word resonated, pushing him toward a pivotal moment of self-discovery. He took a deep breath, allowing the resolve to settle once more over his shoulders, a subtle weight he had decided to bear rather than flee from. The statement of needed action echoed in his mind. Concrete steps, deadlines. It wasn't just about reassuring Jamie. It was the catalyst for a personal transformation he realized he desperately needed. He opened his laptop and began typing an outline of the strategy he would propose in the upcoming meeting. But beyond mere logistics, he sensed that he needed more than just a plan. He required a framework that built not only financial stability, but also trust. An internal dialogue commenced as he crafted each point of the strategy. Am I ready to hold myself accountable? Can I face my fears head-on? The uncomfortable questions churned like a storm inside him. Memories of past failures began to surface, the times he had avoided challenges rather than confront them. Jake shook his head, trying to banish those thoughts. He was not that man anymore. That he paused, letting silence fill the room. He needed to confront his past failures, to lay them bare and acknowledge their lessons. Resentment toward his earlier self faded as he realized that those mistakes had shaped him. They weren't chains to bind him, but stepping stones toward a clearer vision of who he aspired to be. Rising from his chair, he paced the room, reflecting on a deeper question he had always skirted around. What does success really mean to me? Was it just about the numbers, or was it also about integrity and responsibility? Priorities shifted in his prioritization. Therein lay the foundation for the steps he would outline for Jamie. Returning to his desk, Jake took the time to draft a comprehensive plan that emphasized collaboration, transparency, and integrity. This was not merely a professional checklist. It was an engagement with everyone involved: the investors, his team, and most crucially, himself. Each bullet point represented an ethical commitment he was taking not only for the partnership, but also for his own personal growth. As the hours slipped by, he began to feel invigorated rather than overwhelmed. He envisioned the meeting, and in his mind's eye, he was not just presenting a plan. He was embodying his new self, a capable leader ready to take responsibility. Yet doubt lingered at the edges of his confidence, whispering cruel questions. Would the investors accept his vision? Was it too ambitious? Kim, his mentor, had taught him that evolving often meant wading through discomfort. It was a small price to pay for authenticity. The following day, as Jake prepared for the meeting, he was keenly aware of his posture, his breath, the need to project unwavering confidence. He felt the weight of another choice, the willingness to stand open-heartedly before those who had previously doubted him. Vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was potentially his most potent strength. With his presentation meticulously outlined and refined in his mind, Jake stepped into the boardroom. As he took his place before the group of investors, he sensed the gravity of the moment. Every eye on him seemed both intimidating and empowering. This was the confrontation he sought, not just with them, but with himself. Thank you all for being here today, he began, his voice steady. I'm here to present a vision for our partnership's future, grounded in responsiveness, accountability, and trust. He could feel an electric pulse of determination building within. But just as he launched into his presentation, a sudden memory surfaced, the thoughts of prior failures etched in his mind. Could he truly stand unguarded in front of them? Would they see the change, or merely the remnants of the man he once was? Jake pressed forward, realizing that it was time for him to deliver. Beyond mere promises. As he spoke, it was as if each word carried not just business implications, but the weight of his journey thus far. The atmosphere thickened with tension and anticipation, and when he finished, he noticed the reflections around the room, looks of contemplation, uncertainty, and engagement. The real challenge loomed ahead, as he stood ready to face questions that might not just test his plan, but also the very core of who he had chosen to become. Could this moment break the cycle of self-doubt that had defined him for too long? The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome uncertain. But Jake knew this. Regardless of what happened next, he had already begun to transform. As the silence of anticipation enveloped him, he took a deep breath, knowing he was prepared to rise again in the face of whatever lay ahead. Would those present recognize the transformation he had fought so hard to achieve, or would they see only remnants of his past? The tension hung palpably in the air, and for the first time, he felt genuinely ready for their response. The moment hung in the air, thick with anticipation. Jake felt the weight of every gaze upon him, an electric pulse that quickened his heartbeat. He had shared his vision now. It was time for the responses to flow like a tidal wave crashing against the shore. He could sense the undercurrent of skepticism, the questions bubbling just beneath the surface. A bead of sweat formed at his temple, and he battled with the urge to falter. The first investor shifted in their seat, breaking the silence. Interesting points, Jake, but can you tell us what safeguards you'll implement to ensure this vision becomes a reality? Their tone was measured, but Jake detected an undertone of doubt. And there was the question that sent Jake spiraling into self-reflection. Once, he had been paralyzed by such inquiries, his confidence wavering. Now, however, he leaned into the challenge, recalling his strategy's foundation of integrity. Absolutely. Trust is built on transparency, and we'll have regular check-ins to assess progress against our benchmarks. Each step will be documented, shared, and discussed, he replied, his voice resonating with a newfound firmness. The nods around the table just barely eased the tension. But as the questions continued to come, probing deeper into the nuances of his plan, Jake sensed an opportunity to showcase his evolution. Instead of retreating into defensiveness, he offered insight drawn from his personal journey, sharing lessons learned from past complications. It was as if he was ready to forge a new narrative not just of his professional ascent, but of his human experience. Every setback taught me something vital, Jake admitted, his eyes lighting up as he spoke. In moments of uncertainty, I learned that communication is crucial. It's not just about the end goal, it's about fostering a culture of openness and accountability. The atmosphere shifted slightly, as if the tide were beginning to turn. He caught glimmers of intrigue among the investors. They leaned in, relying on his stories as the connecting tissue binding his plan to their expectations. Yet, a familiar discomfort nagged, lurking in his mind like a shadow, asking if he was genuinely ready for this new role. The past, echoing in his thoughts, was relentless. What if they couldn't forgive the missteps he had made? Just then, another investor posed a challenge. What assurance do we have that this time will be different? You have proposed similar strategies before, and they didn't pan out. Why should we believe this will yield a different outcome? It felt as if the ground had been yanked from beneath him. The air became stifling, and Jake took a nanosecond to recalibrate his thoughts. Breathe, he reminded himself, focusing on the journey rather than his past. It was time not only to answer, but to show the depth of his growth. You're right to question. I welcome it. Honest feedback is a critical part of my process now. My past decisions were often clouded by fear of failure, fear of judgment. That's why this plan is rooted in collaboration, ensuring that everyone has a voice, building an environment where failure isn't feared but embraced as a learning experience. He saw surprise flicker among the investors, some of whom exchanged glances. Could it be they were beginning to see the man he had become? The questions persisted, each one sharpening his focus, challenging him in ways he hadn't anticipated. With each query tackled, Jake felt the contours of his old insecurities beginning to dissolve. He embraced this new rhythm, a push and pull, not merely a defensive stance, but one of engagement, curiosity, and commitment. As the meeting drew to a close, Jake felt something within him shift. He had entered this space seeking validation, but ultimately discovered the essence of a leader. The ability to face criticism not as an affront, but as a collective inquiry into growth. The investors seemed to have shifted from skeptics to collaborators, buying into the vision Jake laid out so passionately. Still, the lingering gaze of doubt from the earliest question persisted. Would they truly invest in not just a financial strategy, but a revised version of him? The moment felt surreal, but deep down, Jake knew he had crossed a threshold, one that demanded he confront his fears rather than run from them. As he walked out of the boardroom, a powerful realization settled in. He had not only presented a plan, he had liberated himself from the confines of past disappointments, but the questions remained. How would he sustain this clarity in the face of inevitable obstacles ahead? And more troublingly, was he ready to face those who would still doubt when the moment called for resilience again? With every step he took, the echoes of uncertainty tightened around him, urging him forward into the next crossroads of his journey. The real test of his transformation loomed not just in the boardroom, but in every choice he would face moving forward. Was he strong enough to carry this new understanding through the gauntlet yet to come? Jake stepped out of the boardroom, the heavy door shutting behind him, cutting off the scrutiny of those investors. The clamor of questioning still echoed in his mind. He could still feel the heat of their skepticism brushing against him like a physical weight. Each fleeting expression of doubt had carved itself into his consciousness, setting forth an internal monologue that spiraled between pride and uncertainty. He leaned against the cool wall of the corridor, inhaling deeply. It was a strange juxtaposition. He had articulated a vision to impact not just profits, but lives, yet he still felt tethered to his insecurities. With each breath, he attempted to ground himself, seeking a tangible sense of resolve. How could he move forward when that flickering doubt still lingered? The realization hit hard. He needed to confront it fully. No more sidestepping truth or backing away from fear. His development wasn't merely an academic exercise. It was a visceral battle against the echoes of a former self who might never let go. Closing his eyes, Jake envisioned those investors leaning in, not just listening to rhetoric, but rather engaging with the essence of who he had become. They were not simply evaluating a proposal. They were gauging a person who had decided to face his demons. With a newfound conviction coursing through him, Jake began to walk. The building transformed in his mind from a place of judgment to one of opportunity. Every corner turned felt like an embrace of potential, shifting his focus from the past to the horizon ahead. But a part of him questioned, was he merely chilling the edges of his resolve? Plunging into the next phase of his journey meant digging deeper. He reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts to settle on an old mentor, someone who had seen him at his most vulnerable and still believed in his potential. It rang, the sound crisp and purposeful against the backdrop of his swirling thoughts. "Jake, it's good to hear from you. What is going on?" "Wanda," he breathed, the familiarity comforting as he fought to keep his thoughts clear. "I just had a meeting with potential investors, and I think it's pushing me to reflect on my growth, but I still feel this shadow, this doubt creeping in." "Ah, that shadow," she chuckled softly. "You know it comes with the territory. But the fact that you're aware of it means you're already a few steps ahead. Still, I'm haunted by fears of repeating past mistakes," Jake admitted, the confession exposing a crack in his facade. "How do I stay strong when those doubts arise?" There's power in owning those fears, Jake. Write them down. Acknowledge them. But don't let them define your path. You're not that person anymore. Your experiences led you to where you use that knowledge. Her words struck a chord, resonating deep within him. Yes, fear was present, but it didn't have to dictate the journey or his decisions. He needed to acknowledge it, not for pity, but for clarity. "Thanks, Wanda. I think I know what I need to do now." "Remember, Jake," she continued, progress isn't linear. "Embrace setbacks and let them fuel your resolve." As they hung up, Jake felt a surge of determination. He had days, maybe even weeks, of confronting this daunting venture ahead. It would be filled not only with triumphs, but moments where doubt would claw at his resolve. Yet, every time that shadow loomed, he would have the power to decide how to respond. He sat at the back of a small cafe, an unassuming space tucked away from the corporate world. He took out a notebook simple, yet entirely his own, and began jotting down his thoughts. Drawings of visions he aspired to create. Words of affirmation. And next to them, he pinned down the doubts. What if they don't believe in me? What if I fail? As Jake wrote, each doubt transformed from an oppressive force into a stepping stone. He relished this exercise, reframing the narrative of his life around acceptance rather than fear. But an unsettling thought crept in as he closed the notebook. Was he brave enough to confront those doubts openly? The next meeting wouldn't just involve sharing plans. It would call for a deeper authenticity that could either win them over or shatter his renewed confidence. With determination, he shut the notebook. Each moment counted now. The stakes were higher than ever. And as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting an amber glow through the window, Jake knew he was on the brink of something unprecedented. His transformation hinged not just on how he presented himself, but on how much he was willing to reveal the depth of his vulnerability. The real test awaited not just of his plans, but of the willingness to engage with his fears head-on. Would he muster the courage in the face of skepticism once more? Jake's mind whirred with a blend of excitement and dread as he prepared for his upcoming investor meeting. The morning light streamed into his workspace, illuminating the very vision he had painstakingly outlined in his notebook. But as he looked at the drawings and words brimming with possibility, that persistent shadow of doubt flickered around him like a restless flame. He inhaled sharply, the air seemingly heavy with unvoiced questions. What if his transparent vulnerability was met with disdain? What if the investors, emboldened by their own skepticism, turned away from honesty instead of embracing it? The ghost of past failures loomed, as real and tangible as the papers strewn across his desk. Fueled by a sense of urgency, Jake flipped to a fresh page in his notebook, a blank canvas begging for fresh ideas and approaches. He had explored affirmations and fears, but now it was time to strategize. How could he best frame his narrative of growth? What if he could convert those doubts into an asset rather than liability? He began drafting an outline, deliberately addressing each fear that had once paralyzed him. He pinned key points on how he had learned from his failures. What I was before was not a complete failure, he wrote. It was a necessary step towards understanding resilience. Every word seemed to imbue him with a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about selling an idea. It was about selling himself, an evolved version of Jake, stronger and more aware. Did he still feel vulnerable? Yes. But with each acknowledgement of that vulnerability came clarity. The clock ticked mercilessly toward the hour of reckoning. Jake stood up and paced the room, practicing his pitch in front of the mirror. He emphasized the connection between his personal journey and the product he stood to present. This isn't just about profits. It's about crafting experiences, he declared to his reflection, feeling the fire of sincerity ignite within him. Each iteration felt more grounded, more authentic. And yet, a part of him still braced for rejection. The tremor of uncertainty coursed through his veins, but rather than shrinking away from it, he welcomed the sensation. It reminded him of the stakes involved, the intensity of his aspirations, and the fire he felt to effect change. Jake spotted his phone on the table, and, impulsively, he dialed Wanda's number again. Maybe he needed a final word of encouragement, a touchstone to steady his resolve. When she answered, her voice was a reassuring balm. "Wanda, I've been drafting my pitch, and I can feel the fire inside me, but the jitters are mounting. What if I show too much of myself, and it backfires?" "Jake," she replied, a steady tone cutting through his spiraling thoughts. "Your authenticity is your power. It takes courage to share your truth. There's no safety in a facade. If they sense you're real, raw, and ready to embrace your journey, they'll engage with that. But remember," she continued, "authenticity doesn't mean bearing your soul completely. It means conveying your essence as it relates to your vision. Share the lessons learned, not just the struggles. That's the part that resonates." With a mix of apprehension and anticipation thrumming beneath his skin, Jake thanked her and ended the call. The conversation crystallized something within him. This was no longer just a pitch. This was a declaration of purpose, a confession of his evolution. Minutes later, as he walked through the entrance of the familiar boardroom, he noticed the critical expressions of the investors seated around the glossy table. A part of him wanted to recoil, to hide the doubts scrawled in his notes. Yet he stood tall, swaying between fear and determination. The moment of truth was upon him. Would he muster the courage to transform skepticism into connection, to reveal his growth as a strength rather than a vulnerability? Taking a deep breath, he approached the podium, each step resonating with his refusal to conceal himself any longer. It was time to transform his journey of doubt into a flourishing dialogue of authenticity. He felt the weight of his past, but he refused to buckle under its pressure. As he began to speak, the silence in the room thickened, poised on the precipice of breakthrough or failure. Would his voice carry the truth of his journey, or would it be drowned out by the echo of their skepticism? Jake stood before the boardroom, his heart pounding in sync with the mounting tension around him. It felt as if the walls were closing in, challenging him to prove the validity of his transformation. Every face turned toward him seemed to scrutinize not just his proposal, but the metamorphosis he had undergone. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the present moment. "Thank you for being here today," he began, his voice steadier than he had anticipated. "I stand before you not just as a businessman, but as a man who has walked a complicated path. I've made mistakes. I've floundered under pressure, but each misstep has fueled my commitment to fostering integrity and collaboration in every venture I pursue." The words surged forth, tinged with a potency born from vulnerability. For the first time, he didn't shy away from admitting his past flaws. "In previous years, I sought success as a marker of worth, often losing sight of what truly matters: trust, connection, and accountability. But my recent experiences have revealed a profound truth. Success without these elements is hollow." He saw nods around the table as he spoke of his journey, a flicker of intrigue igniting in their eyes. The fears that once threatened to overpower him began to dissolve, replaced by the warmth of genuine engagement. "Today, I'm here not simply to present a strategy, but to offer a vision, one that integrates lessons learned from my journey," he continued, now reaching the core of his proposal. "We need a shared commitment to construct an environment where dialogue thrives, where we learn from setbacks, and where accountability is not simply transactional, but intrinsic." The investors leaned in, seemingly captivated by his sincerity. They weren't just hearing a pitch, they were witnessing a transformation. Jake took a breath, feeling the support of those he loved: Rosa, Mark, even Clara, infusing him with courage. "I envision regular assessment meetings where we'll not only review progress, but discuss roadblocks transparently. This isn't just about numbers. It's about people, our teams, our associates, and our audience." Moments passed, and as he concluded his overview, he prepared for the expected barrage of critical questioning that had trailed his past efforts. "Jake, what safeguards will you implement to ensure accountability?" An investor challenged, mirroring the skepticism Jake had faced previously. "Every milestone achieved will come with metrics that inform our progress," Jake replied. "But beyond the numbers, I will foster an environment where we can openly discuss failures without fear of blame. This is about building trust, not just reclaiming it." With each response, doubt transformed into a determined confidence. He wasn't simply defending his ideas. He was showcasing his commitment to positive change. The investors continued their inquiries, but instead of feeling cornered, Jake found himself engaged, excited. Their questions pushed him to articulate his vision more clearly, fortifying his resolve and proving his growth. Finally, as the meeting drew to a close, a notable shift occurred. "Your openness is refreshing," one investor ventured, a hint of warmth lacing their voice. "It takes guts to lay your past bare, especially in this industry. We can appreciate a leader who acknowledges their journey." Jake felt warmth flush through him. It wasn't just acknowledgement, it was recognition of his transformation. This moment defined not only his growth, but also proved his worth. "Will this lead to a partnership?" another investor queried, the stakes higher than ever. Each breath felt thicker than before, brought to life as these seasoned professionals deliberated. "Yes," Jake replied, his voice unwavering with newfound confidence. "But it will require us all to embrace this shared journey. Together, we can redefine success, leveraging the lessons we've learned to guide future endeavors. Our collaboration must be rooted in authenticity and integrity." As he left the boardroom, a wave of triumph washed over him. The journey was not concluded, far from it, but he had taken a pivotal step not just for his professional life, but for his personal redemption. Jake glanced at his phone, where a message from Mark glowed brightly. A single congratulations anchored his growing sense of fulfillment. He grinned, an uncomplicated joy stemming from a connection that had become redefined through honesty and commitment. His life's priorities were beginning to crystallize, the echoes of loneliness fading. In the weeks that followed, as Jake navigated the complexities of his new partnership, he consciously chose to continue building intimate connections, both with Mark and those around him. The recognition he experienced in the boardroom authorized him to explore new ambitions through the lens of vulnerability and genuine human connection. Rosa's impact, Mark's encouragement, and Clara's unwavering belief kept his transformation alive. No longer the titan consumed by success, Jake emerged as a leader committed to fostering relationships over material gain. He had achieved a genuine connection, a full circle from the man who had once lost himself amidst wealth. Jake had proven he was capable of real transformation, gaining not only professional success, but deeply rewarding personal relationships. It was clear, authentic growth necessitated courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to embrace every shadow along the way. His heart lightened. He now stepped boldly into a future that invited him to thrive. It was here, in the power of connection and integrity, he finally found his true self, the man, the brother, the leader who had no intention of looking back. Thank you for being part of this remarkable journey. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support makes all the difference.